Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel SoftwareDude. Today we are diving into a fundamental concept in software development, that is dependency injection, right? Dependency injection is a design pattern that plays a crucial role in creating modular, maintainable and testable code, right? And it is often one of the parameters that are looked for during coding interviews, right? Your coding style, how are you injecting dependencies, right? In this video, we are going to explore what dependency injection is, why is it important, and different strategies to implement dependency injection, right? And generally people talk about only one. We are going to look at that, but there are multiple strategies of doing dependency injection depending on the need of your application, right? So let's get started. What is dependency injection, right? Dependency injection is a design pattern where the dependencies of a class are injected from the outside rather than being created within the class itself, right? So you might be wondering, why bother with a dependency injection, right? Well, it brings several advantages, like for example, improved modularity, testability, maintainability, right? Now, what are the types of dependency injection? Like we discussed, there are mainly three types. Constructor injection. Constructor injection is the most popular type of dependency injection whenever you are doing it. But there are other two, which is the method injection and also the property injection, right? So let's get started with the constructor injection. Constructor injection, what is constructor injection? Dependencies are injected through a class constructor, right? Simple. Let's take an example and I'm going to show the code. So primarily here you can see there are on the left there is a message interface which basically represents a messaging service, if you will, right? Below that we have two concrete implementations of the message service interface. One is the email service, one is the SMS service, right? They are implementing the send message method. On the right, we have a notification service, which is a class that depends on the message service, right? The message service dependency is injected through its constructor. If you notice, by injecting the message service dependency through the constructor of the notification service, we basically allow flexibility in choosing different implementations of messaging service, right? This makes it easier to say switch or extend functionality without modification of the in the notification service class, right? You can basically modify anything in the message service, but that will not change anything on the notification service, right? This separation of concern makes the code more modular and maintainable, right? And then below in the main method, we are basically demonstrating by creating an instance of notification service, and then obviously previously two major instances of the email service and the SMS service, with like different messaging services which are injected and then sending notification using those instances, right? So this is a very basic example of constructor injection, but primarily whenever you think of dependency injection through constructors, this is how it happens, right? You are basically injecting through the constructor. Now let's look at method injection. Method injection, here you provide the dependencies to a class through its method rather than the constructor, right? Let's take a look at another example, the same example, but let's see how we can implement that using method injection, right? On the left, you have the message service interface, email service and SMS service, which are basically the same as the previous example. On the right, we have the notification service, and this is where we have primarily changed the implementation to make it a method injection. What is happening? Notification service, if you notice, has a send notification method that takes a message service as a parameter, right? This allows, this method allows the caller to inject the messaging service for a specific notification, right? So if you notice in the main class below, we create instances of the messaging services like the email service and the SMS service, and the single instance of notification service. Previously, we were creating two instances of notification service. We are creating only a single instance of notification service. We then use the send notification method to send the message using different messaging services injected through the method. So if you see the last two lines in the main class, notification services dot send notification, and we are passing the email service, and then notification service dot send notification, we are passing the SMS service, right? This is how you are basically injecting the dependencies, which are the email service and the SMS service, through its method, right? Method injection is useful when you want to provide dependencies only for a very specific method, right? Not for the entire class. So that is where the segregation is, and that can be useful whenever you are implementing. Generally, people just go ahead and flood a class with its dependencies through the constructor, but that might not always be needed, right? You might have a very specific concrete method which can depend on different types of like different types of dependencies, and which can be injected only at the method level, not at the class level, right? Can be beneficial in scenarios where, like for example, different methods of a class may require different dependencies, right? That is also possible, where if you want to include everything at the class level, it will just be a superset of everything, right? Where each method might not actually need all the dependencies, right? So that is method injection. Next, let's look at property injection, right? Property injection, dependencies are injected through its properties or fields, right? So let's take the same example. I mean, I've not repeated the message service, email service. That's consider that is the same. But again, the magic happens in the notification service, right? The notification service in this case has a private message service property, right? And a setter method with like set message service, right, is provided for the property injection. The send notification method uses the injected message service to send the notification, right? On the right hand side, if you see the main method, we basically create instances of the messaging service, email service, SMS service, and the single instance of the notification service, similar to how we did for method injection. We use the set message service method to inject different messaging services, and then we use the send notification method to show how sending the notification with the injected services, right? So basically the difference between the three types is, in the constructor you are basically providing it in the class constructor. You already have to initialize and inject all the types of dependencies previously and then use them in different methods. In method injection, you can provide those in the method, in the dependencies, which might not be might not be needed for all methods in a class, right? And in property, you are basically providing that as a property or as a field, where you are providing a setter method and then setting the dependency first and then using the method itself, right? Property injection allows flexibility in setting dependencies after the object has been created, right? But obviously it comes with certain drawbacks, such as potential for null references if its dependency is not set, right? So you have to have those checks, like if you see in the notification service class, and the first check is whether the message service is null or not, right? It is often considered like less preferable than constructor injection for managing class dependencies, for obvious reasons, for different types of validations and checks that you have to put in place. But this is also a type of way where you can inject dependencies, right? Now let's take a look at the pros and cons of dependency injection, right? Like why do we even care, right? Starting with the pros, first has decoupling, right? Dependency injection promotes loose coupling between classes, right, which makes it easier to replace or modify components without affecting the entire system, right? For example, you can switch between different implementations of a dependency without changing the dependent class, right? Next is testability, like we mentioned. Dependency injection facilitates unit testing by allowing you to inject mock or test implementations of dependencies, right? We have all done that. Third is flexibility. DI provides flexibility in configuring and managing components, as dependencies can be injected at runtime, right? For example, you can configure different implementations of a service based on configuration or user preferences, right, at runtime. So that is possible. Fourth, maintainability. Code is more maintainable because changes to dependencies don't require modifications to the dependent classes, right? So like for example, adding a new feature or changing the behavior of a service does not affect classes that depend on it, right? Obviously, readability. It offers like often leads to cleaner, more readable code, but basically clearly expressing the dependencies in the constructor or methods, right? Class constructors explicitly declare the dependencies required for the class to function, so which is where it becomes very readable, code readable, right? And then test driven development, yeah, DI aligns well with TDD principles, as it allows for easy substitution of dependencies during testing, right? Now you can, for example, write a test for a class by injecting test doubles or mocks for its dependencies, right? So those are some of the pros. which are primarily everywhere as of today. If you are using a large scale software application and you are developing code, dependency injection is almost used everywhere, and it's a good to use pattern in coding and in coding interviews. That is what people look for, right? How accustomed are you with these kind of like dependency injections? But having said that, there are certain cons also. So let's look at them. Obviously there is a learning curve. Adopting DI like may have a learning curve, especially for developers who are new to the concept, right? Like developers might need to need time to understand the intricacies of dependency injection frameworks, right? So that is at times a challenge. Configuration complexity, configuring and wiring like dependencies manually or using a DI framework can introduce complexities, right? Large projects with many dependencies, right, may require extensive configuration, right, which would be challenging to manage at times. Runtime errors, issues related to dependency injection such as missing dependencies may manifest at runtime, which is a problem. Inversion of control and container like overuse of DI containers. Like basically DI frameworks use a lot of IOC containers, which can introduce overhead and may impact performance, right? Over reliance of like on the DI containers for managing dependencies can lead to service locator anti-pattern. So there is anti-pattern for that. And increased code volume. Yes, in some cases I've seen using DI may result in increased code volume because auto generated code when you are using several kind of frameworks due to the need to declare dependencies explicitly, right? So those are some of the cons, but I don't see those are like cons not to use DI. Like DI has been more efficient in handling code readability, testability, maintainability, right? Than the cons of it, which can be managed, I would say. So hopefully this was useful. I would definitely recommend everyone who is giving a coding interview or a software development interview, if you're writing code, do showcase DI capabilities in your code, primarily when you are talking about object-oriented programming and those kind of concepts, right? Thanks for watching. Hopefully this was useful.